Hello subscribers and non-subscribers, and welcome back to ChäoS. I do want to say this real quick. I am using a slightly different recording setup with Bandicam. I've slightly adjusted the settings a little bit. Hopefully it'll still come out fine. I changed it to use an MP4 as the file type rather than a .avi, and I've also told it to use AAC as the audio codec, as well as to use AMD hardware acceleration. So I'm curious to see exactly how it's going to turn out. So as I said, we'll see how it turns out, and that I had adjusted the settings. So I want to let you guys know that in case things become a little weird in the video. So let's see. This is the save that we want. It looks like we're going to have to, I think, start overriding saves. Oh, no, okay, no, we'll be fine. We've still got quite a few. Is there any way to go back? Let's see if just keep clicking next will take me back. Okay, yep. Okay, nonetheless, this is the save that we want. Unable to stand it any longer, I single-handedly ended the call. One second, trying to get my timer set up in case this episode ends up going long. So give me one moment to set a timer for 30 minutes. Hopefully it'll vibrate. I haven't actually used the timer on my new phone at all, so we'll see if it ends up actually working properly. But nonetheless, let's see. I realized that without my noticing it, my breathing had grown frenzied. The sweat that had been oozing from my forehead since before not only showed no signs of stopping, it was starting to increase, enough to go dripping from my chin down to my feet. Looking rather worried about me, the demon girl quietly offered me a handkerchief. A pretty patternless handkerchief colored a faint vermilion. There was a slight floral scent to it. Instead of taking it, I attempted to somehow keep my composure and organize my thoughts about my current circumstances, but it didn't go too well. My endless suspicious emotions spun down into a whirlpool of disorder. After sighing in what sounded like light disappointment as she put away her handkerchief, the demon girl asked me this with a triumphant expression. It was the attitude of someone who'd known the answer from the start. I couldn't afford to answer. What was she? An ordinary classmate of mine? Or a monster? I couldn't tell. Maybe I was the one who'd gone crazy. If you took the chat with Shogun into consideration, it was hard to discard the possibility that someone other than myself was controlling me. Or else only my memories of this demon girl, of the girl called Sakihata Rimi, had by some accident been knocked clean out of me. Whatever the case, I didn't understand myself. Was it memory loss? I'm not going to try to... What is that? Somnambulism, I guess? Something like that? Something else altogether? In fact, actually, you know what? I'm going to go and look that word up. Where is it? There it is. Okay, let me pull up Google. Okay, so let's see. S-O-N or S-O-M-N-A-M. There it is. The act of getting up and walking around while asleep. Okay, so sleepwalking. Okay, let's go back. The demon girl spoke to me kindly. Be careful of kind words. Anyone who acts nice to a creepy otaku like me must have an ulterior motive. I shook my head to show her my refusal and raised my face with all my strength. Sweat got in my eyes, making my vision blur. The demon girl's face was closer than I'd expected. What color does she hold in those eyes of hers?
なんで
何何
ここにいる
なんでってタクに会いに来たんだよ。もしかして勝手に部屋に入ったこと怒ってる？でもそれはタクがちっとも返事してくれないから悪いんだよ。結構長い時間ノックしてたんだから。
I thrust the borrowed cell phone back at her. As I watched the demon girl timidly take it back, I asked her again.
なんで
今度は何？
ここにいる
What was her reason for coming to visit me? If she'd come to kill me, she would have acted on her intentions long ago. Yet, why hasn't she done anything?
ああ、ここに来た理由？ね。
The demon girl reached in her bag and pulled out a one-sheet printout.
はい。進路希望のプリント持ってきてあげたの。
Without quite meaning to, I accepted it from her. Certainly, it had the future aspiration questionnaire written on it, with blank fields for up to 3 entries. Was that really it? Only that?
帰ってよ
I didn't want to get involved. I mustn't get involved with 3D girls. This was a trap. Don't listen. This wasn't reality. It was a game. On top of that, full of bugs. Because there were too many contradictions it didn't hold together as a story.
僕に関わらないでよ
If you don't mean to kill me, then please let me be. I belong to myself. Some me that wasn't me might have been pals with Sakihata Rimi, but that had no connection with my current self. Holding my head, I closed my heart. I started to tremble, dreaming that a girl called Sakihata Rimi had never been there in the first place. After some time, I heard the sound of the door opening, telling my ears that the demon girl had left. Okay, so it seemed I actually wasn't that far off from the end of that little sequence, so if I had continued last episode for just a couple more minutes, I would have been fine. But, how was I supposed to know? It was starting to get a little lengthy. Nonetheless, only the pale light of the PC monitor floated faintly in the middle of the pitch-black room. It reflected a screensaver of Seira, a character from Bloodtoon the Animation. In this container house, which a girl called Sakihata Rimi had visited half a day earlier, there could now be found solely the form of its owner, Nishijo Takumi. The time was already nearing 5 in the morning. It was Takumi's daily habit to play online games until dawn, then sleep like a log on his sofa. Now, too, Takumi was lying on the sofa in an uncomfortable-looking position. He didn't use his bed to sleep in. Though he possessed a proper bed, the reason he didn't sleep there was because it had been monopolized by manga volumes, CDs, and so forth that had piled atop it. In the period when he avoided cleaning because it would be too much of a bother, his bed had gradually transformed to a type of shelving. Henceforth, he began using the 2-seat sofa as his sleeping space. A painful-sounding moan spilled from Takumi's mouth. Perhaps he was having a nightmare. His entire body was sweating, and his closed eyelids trembled. His expression twisted agonizingly, and as he tossed and turned over and over, he came close to falling off the sofa. Suddenly lying on his back, Takumi opened his eyes abnormally wide. His eyes were thoroughly bloodshot, and furthermore, his eyeballs themselves were twitching. Without a single blink, he lumbered to his feet and drifted, swaying over to his PC. Refraining from sitting down, he moved the mouse while standing. The screensaver disappeared and his desktop filled the monitor. Illuminated by the monitor's pallid light, Takumi's expression was horribly empty. His body wavered from side to side, and drool hung down from his half-open mouth. His figure was that of a prototypical sleepwalker. As though delirious, Takumi started up his net browser and opened the main page of that channel. The movements of his body were lackadaisical, I guess, but he showed no hesitation in selecting threads related to NewGen and the breaking news board. In total, they numbered approximately 60, and Takumi opened them one by one in order from the top down. And while gazing at the monitor, he began touch typing. He repeated this in each of the 60 existing threads. The letters he typed were few, but all of them formed the same sentence. So they're not going to tell us what that sentence was, but I'm going to assume it was probably "whose eyes are those?" But I don't actually know. The next day I headed to the hospital first thing in the morning. I hadn't been able to confirm it the last time I came here, but today I would definitely get them to tell me I was normal. Dr. Takashino would remember me. I'd revealed that I was Nishijo, the patient up until 40 years ago, and I'd get to hear all kinds of things from him. I wasn't the crazy one. The demon girl and Misumi were. The doctor would surely tell me so. This hospital opened at 8 in the morning, somewhat earlier than regular hospitals, which is why I had come exactly in time for opening hours. But the sofas in the lobby were already filled with seated old people. Why? Even though the hospital had barely opened for the day, why were there so many people here? It's unfair to get a head start. Come on time like you're supposed to. Inwardly insulting them, I had no option left but to wait. After an hour of waiting, I found myself regretting that I didn't make an appointment. But immediately afterward, they called my name, and I was relieved at the fact that I hadn't been forced to wait as long as last week. By the way, the one waiting for me in the examining room they brought me to wasn't Dr. Takashima, but instead an unfamiliar white-haired old man.
高階先生は
Upon my growing perplexed, the nurse standing in attendance behind him, what was her name again? Hazuki, answered with an apologetic expression.
高階先生はもういません。
Not here anymore?
もういないというか、過労がたたって先週末に倒れてしまわれてね。今週はそれでずっと休みだよ。
What a nightmare. My one and only ally. Wait. Had Dr. Takashima really collapsed from fatigue?
陰謀だ。悪魔女の陰謀だ。
西條さん
She definitely put poison in his food, or sent him a threatening letter, or done something else to drive him into a psychological corner. She was trying to isolate me, make me helpless. I had no intention of letting anyone besides Dr. Takashima examine me, so instead of undergoing a checkup, I left the hospital as though I were fleeing it. Leaning against the fence surrounding the roof, I stared vaguely up at the sky. The skies in Shibuya were drab, and it would be hard to call them clear.
病院にはもう行かない方がいい。
The demon girl's dragnet was threatening. Maybe I had nowhere left to run. Maybe even the detectives I'd met yesterday had in truth been fakes, the demon girl's cronies, and they had been testing me. because the timing had been way too good. Come on, the demon girl had pushed her way into my room right after I had met with the detectives. She was a demon, after all. She wasn't human. It'd hardly take any effort for her to manipulate human hearts. I had no evidence to back that up, but conversely, there was no evidence that she wasn't a demon. In that case, the only way to survive was by presupposing the worst. Was there no one who would be my ally? All of them seemed like my enemies. Everyone looked like one of the demon girl's underlings.
助けて誰か助けてよ
Why don't I have even a single ally? Why wouldn't anyone come save me? Why did I have to end up like this? I felt terribly forlorn, and I wanted some source of support, someone who would protect me, something that would protect me. I'd be fine with anyone, so someone, please, extend a saving hand toward me. Suddenly, I thought of FES's Kishimoto Ayase's face, and the words she had given voice to when we met at school. I'd been lost in my delusions and hadn't heard them, but Misumi had said the following: "Find your sword. Finding your sword will save you."
Ken.
If this were a game, I'd be a hero, and we'd reach the usual cliche development about my having to get my hands on a legendary sword to defeat the demon. Without my seeking it out, I'd recently heard the keyword sword from 2 different 3D girls. And there remained a chance that FES was my ally, although, going by her attitude, Girl B had she been called Senna? Was most likely affiliated with the demon girl. A sword, huh?
剣だ剣を手に入れるんだそうすれば
I muttered to myself as though I'd gone off my rocker. For me, it was the equivalent of clutching at straws. If I got a sword, I might be released from this nightmare. I couldn't help having such expectations. It wasn't that I believed what FES had said about it granting me salvation, but I lacked anything else to cling to. If nothing else, it'd be best to research this. I got down to running an online search immediately. For the moment, I started off by checking to see whether a sword similar to the ones carried by FES and Senna had appeared in any anime, but I couldn't spot anything like that in this season's crop of anime, at least. I'd expected as much. I normally check out all the recent new anime. It could be a real handful given that lately there could sometimes be 30 or 40 new shows in one season, but I watched the first episodes of all of them and then decided which to keep following. Of course, since there was YouTube, I didn't have any problems completing my lineup with anime from the BS and CS satellite subscription channels, which is why there was no way I'd overlooked any anime, and no such sword had appeared in any of the shows I'd checked. It was that distinctive looking. If it showed up, it ought to have caught my eye, but I had no memory of seeing one. Although I couldn't do anything about it if I'd seen it when I was being controlled by someone outside myself. Next, I tried running a search about the sword itself rather than anime series.
ほとんどがゲームの攻略サイトじゃんか
Terms I was closely familiar with, such as Enshu's Shangri-La Edge, kept popping up. At this rate, I wouldn't make any progress, even though I had to hurry up and find it. I had the sense that Senna had used a more concrete name when speaking of it, but what could it have been? Remember, your nightmare won't end unless you remember. Right, D sword. I quickly stuck it in the input field and ran a search. I got hits! Only 2 of them, though. Even so, I was gradually starting to think of these 2 links as my road to salvation. Holding down my excitement, I investigated them in order from the top down. There's only 2 of them. You could just open 2 separate links. Or tabs. Gah, the page is dead. Shit, what the hell? No, calm down. Go back one more time and take a look at the cache. The page included an illustration, a recreation based on how the sword was described in works of literature. It's Wikipedia.
元ネタは伝承か。
Yes, I suppose so. Well, that doesn't really look like the sword we saw, and actually, if you guys want to read all the stuff that they had up there, you can. You just gotta pause.
でもセナって女が持ってたのに比べるとこっちは随分地味だな。
And that is true. It is very plain looking in comparison. In the first place, why was it such a minor sword? Why not go with Excalibur or Kusanagi, something in the Major League? No, this wasn't the time to complain. Major or minor, it didn't matter as long as it could save me. I decided to explore a little more. Continuing, I clicked the second hit. The words, "I bought a D-sword," particularly concerned me. Was a D-sword something you could purchase? The blog's writer was apparently male, so I could deduce that it wasn't the demon girl or Senna. It also says over here, profile, sex equals man. That said, his level of energy was far too different from that of Shogun. Was he a completely unrelated third party, or had the person behind the blog deliberately changed the particulars of how he wrote? I understood that no answer would come no matter how much I thought about it, so I stopped looking at the blog. More importantly, it seemed that the store he'd mentioned, the one called Town Vanguard, was located in Shibuya. I had a feeling that it was too good to be true, but it also had a feeling that it was destiny. There was another way to look at it. It was precisely because this store was in Shibuya that I'd twice run into a girl holding a D-sword smack in the middle of Shibuya. Didn't I often hear about things that were secretly popular with various minority subcultures in Shibuya? For now, I looked up Town Vanguard, but it didn't seem to have an official site, instead an image-based intro page on an online map. If they didn't have an official site, that meant they didn't take orders online. I searched Taboo, auctions, but didn't come across anything likely looking, which meant that my only option was to go to the store in person. I didn't want to go outside very much, but
剣は手に入れなくちゃ。手に入れないとダメなんだ。
now I had come to think of it as my sole, absolute means of fighting back against the demon girl. I didn't know what I would do, in concrete terms, after obtaining the sword. I wasn't brave enough to use it to kill her, or anything of the sort. Even so, I harbored the hope that if I got a sword, I would be somewhat freed from the terror that tortured me. Yeah, a D-sword was like a protective charm. It would surely strengthen my heart. Something about that sword strangely attracted me. At any rate, it seemed that this store was located near Cat Street. That's an interesting name for a street, but so be it. Cat Street is a twisty, winding road from Shibuya to Harajuku that runs about a block off Meiji Avenue. Apparently, it had been built by filling in an area that was originally a stream. That would probably explain why it's so winding. There were various explanations behind why it had originally come to be called Cat Street, such as there being many feral cats, or because it was the sort of narrow path that only cats would use. Well, not that it made much of a difference to me. Cat Street was fairly far away from me. By foot, it could easily take 15 or 20 minutes to get there. It'd be a quick trip by bike, but unfortunately, I didn't have one. I decided to go by a route that took me past the plaza in front of the station, then past Shuto, I guess, by way of cutting through Miyashita Park. Setting a quick pace, I crossed the overpass that went over Meiji Avenue. I'd finally arrived. Growing ever more impatient, I had become irritated at the distance. Cat Street had been quiet compared to the big shopping district, and its image was far closer to that of Harajuku than Shibuya. The stores lined up there were all chic stores that, of course, had nothing to do with me. Go off and die. Knowing that, I was practically acting delirious as I walked along. I became even more annoyed. For me, being here was like playing in an away game. Those bastards around me thought they were so damn cool, and there were more couples in the shopping district. They probably were acting like they had money even though they didn't, so chances were that most of them were window shopping, lol, waste of time. I felt some regret, thinking to myself that I shouldn't have come after all, but I reminded myself that it was all for the sake of obtaining a sword, and determinedly put up with it. For now, I went on having a staring contest with my map as I swiftly went along, rushing toward my destination, while doing my best not to exchange looks with passerbys. Town Vanguard was deep within a narrow side road that split off from Cat Street.
ここか。
Though I'd only ventured one side street away from the main road, the ambience underwent a dramatic change. It was a thin, narrow, dirty alley, one impossible for cars to pass through. On either side were wood-built residences and out-of-business stores with closed shutters, which invariably came equipped with spray-painted graffiti on them. Cat Street, which seemed so clean from the front, with all its high-class brand-name stores, was in the end no more than a flimsy papier-mâché facade. Behind that facade lay any number of mercilessly discarded wrecks. Although I personally disliked both the front and the back, both were unfamiliar territory for me. The only place I ever wanted to go was Ensu. Even so, Town Vanguard had a far smaller, darker air to it than I'd imagined. I started to understand why the blogger who had mentioned it had described it as an underground store. Despite the fact that an open sign had been hung, you couldn't say it was doing brisk business even by way of flattery, and it was awfully hard to enter. How was I supposed to go in such a sketchy-seeming store when it was asking too much of me just to have me go alone to a gyudon shop? I want to go home. No, but I need to get my hands on a sword no matter what. What was I supposed to do? I spent a little while going back and forth in front of the store. No one passed through this narrow alley. I'd whiled away 30 minutes with my pacing, but not a single person had gone by me. I decided to brace myself and go on in, but then my courage failed me, causing me to abandon all hope, and I'd kept repeating this cycle innumerable times. But I couldn't go home empty-handed. This was the only place I could obtain a D-sword. Even though I understood that with my head, my instincts made me reluctant to enter the shop. I imagined that maybe a clerk would come out for me. Of course, she'd be a cute maid, and she'd talk to me with the kind of voice you'd hear in an anime. She'd have a perfect grasp of exactly what I wanted, and she'd hold a D-sword out to me in a wonderfully friendly manner. Here you are, please take this sword, master. Get a hold of yourself. Chill out, me. Just as I thought about how it'd be so much easier if only things would unfold in that way, a lone 3D girl appeared from within the store as though my thoughts had reached her. Unlike in my fantasy, her clothes were rather gaudy, the kind that made you wonder what nomad camp she'd snagged them from. Her face, however, was amazingly glum. Her hair was cut in the bomber head style, and creepy patterns were drawn on the bandana around it. She said she was a store worker and had come out after seeing me wishy-washily go around outside. My fantasy hadn't exactly become reality. Well, that was to be expected. Before I had any idea what was happening, the clerk forcibly led me inside. Despite my having spent so long holding off on entering, I didn't have a chance to turn her down. So, in the end, I came in. It was all very well that I cleared the most excruciating hurdle, but if this store were under the demon girl's control and everything about the D-sword had been a trap to lure me in, I'd have no right to complain about getting slaughtered on the spot. I swiftly surveyed the store's dim interior. There wasn't a single customer. The air was awfully stagnant and faintly hazy. The unpleasant mixture of the smells of tobacco and mold reached my nose. I'd probably start feeling ill if I stayed here so much as 5 minutes. Though I spotted items that might have been products, it was difficult to judge whether or not they were really for sale. Really? Because I see a bunch of just things that say sale on them. I'd imagine it's kind of easy to tell. All of them had been left about haphazardly, and there was no way to distinguish them from plain garbage. And for beginning, not one of them had a price tag. I didn't realize until I came in, but there were a lot of porno merch. Among them were these sorts of devices you'd often see in rape/mutilation eroge, and I was at a loss for a safe place to look. Apparently, this store was similar to a variety shop aimed at adults. After bringing me into the store, the clerk sat down on a stool beside the counter, zoning out as she smoked and showing no indication of continuing to meddle with me. She must have been one of the sources of the mist in here. Regardless of the fact that it had been less than a minute since I'd first come in, nervous, embarrassment, a weird sense of pressure, and my feeling physically sick made nasty sweat seep out of my forehead. I wanted to leave this otherworldly place as fast as possible. I had to be quick about finding a D-sword. I walked toward the back as I browsed my way through the store. I soon located the corner for fantasy-related weapons, which had been written about in the blog I'd found. That one corner stood apart from the rest, being the only area with conspicuous colors. Numerous pole-shaped toys had been neatly put up on display. All of them were long tubes, while they might have been different colors, virtually all of them were lightsabers. Also, one could tell right away how badly they were made, that they were bootlegs. I was skeptical of whether they'd really glow. It would seem that the light shuriken mentioned in the blog had sold out, which was also surprising. Except, mixed in with the lightsabers was just one item that obviously differed from the rest. One look was all it took for me to know it was a D-sword, because it was more or less the same as the illustration I had seen online. I tried picking it up. It was unexpectedly light. There goes my timer. I was wondering what it was made of, though. It seemed like soft vinyl. There was no blade, the edge was slippery, and of course it didn't hurt me in the slightest even when I stroked it with my fingers. Compared to the ones held by Senate and FES, it was poorly designed and lacked a sense of weight. And more than anything else, it didn't give me the sense that it could sever anything with the lightest of touches. I wondered if perhaps it was a fake. Yes. Yes, it is. I was worried about it, but there wasn't anything else in this store you could have called a D-sword. No, but I'm sure there's plenty of things in the store that you could call fakes. Would this even shine in the first place? The D-sword FES that swung about at her show had glass parts embedded in its blade, which let out a blue light and looked incredibly badass. But there was no glass to be seen anywhere on the sword I had in hand. Maybe I ought to give up on buying it. This D-sword was so crudely made as to make me reach that conclusion, never mind how long it had taken me to get here. But find your sword. Finding your sword will save you. I recalled FVS's words. Right. If I didn't buy it right here and now, I'd lose my only chance of obtaining a D-sword. It looked cheap at the moment, but maybe once it recognized me as its rightful master, it would manifest a mysterious power. Or maybe I'd seen too many anime and manga. But I had sensed just that sort of unknown power in FES and Senna's swords, so even this sword must... what to do? While I debated with myself, the clerk came and stood right behind me before I knew it. Smirking darkly, she pointed at the D-sword and muttered, 10,000 yen, and I'll throw in a free bonus. At first, its absurd cheapness made me doubt my ears. I certainly hadn't thought it would be less expensive than a figure. I had built up a fair amount of savings from RMT, and if it only cost 10,000 yen, I could get away with buying it simply by giving up on purchasing one figure. Upon hearing the price and the additional fact that it was the last one they had, I came to an immediate decision. The free bonus was a cheap-looking bangle. Frankly, I didn't want it. I went through hell after buying it. Town Vanguard didn't do deliveries, and so my only option was to carry it home myself. Toy or not, my excitement instantly cooled when I thought about how I'd have to cross through the heart of Shibuya carrying such a stupidly long sword. But I'd already paid, and the clerk fiercely refused to let me perform a return. This is a pretty intense type of humiliation play, having to haul a huge toy like this down a fashionable street. As expected, the delinquent couples and stylish ladies who passed me went by with mocking smiles. Shit. They should all die. I hunched over single-mindedly and hastened on my way home, internally entertaining fantasies of taking the D-sword I just bought and slashing about with it in the middle of the road, massacring innocent people, creating a festival of blood. I'd made it back at last. Partway, though, I'd broken into a run and had kept at it ever since, so I was breathing hard by the time I reached my base. The cold looks from the other pedestrians had really stung. I was impressed with Senna for being able to endure this embarrassment. In a certain sense, it made me respect her. I stood no chance of following in her footsteps. An abrupt sound came from my blind spot, a place I couldn't see from here in the shadow of my base. Was someone there? Petrified in place, I gulped down my breath. The ever so innocent smile of a demon girl who'd called herself Remy popped into my head. Maybe she had come again. Maybe this time she had come to kill me for real. What should I do? Should I run? I sensed a presence. The sunset cast someone's shadow across the ground. No matter how I looked at it, that silhouette was female. I instantly readied my D-sword. When I actually held it up like this, it felt even less dependable than I thought. Senna's sword had possessed a mysterious formidability and an overwhelming kind of pressure that refused to let anyone near it. But the D-sword in my hands didn't have anything of the sort. Maybe it really was a fake. Could I fight with something like this? Of course I couldn't. I couldn't do it even if I had the real thing. Plus, I hadn't understood until I tried holding it in the way I was now, but it was pretty heavy. Maybe I was gripping it wrong. In any case, it would prove impossible to swing it around properly. The shadow unexpectedly wavered. It was approaching me. I squeezed my eyes shut and haphazardly slashed the sword out in front of me. I myself didn't think I'd be able to defeat my opponent that way. Despite that, I harbored the faint hope that as long as I had this sword, I'd be okay. That it'd somehow do something for me. But it didn't hit anything. My enemy didn't say anything. Could it be that a single strike from my D-sword had utterly destroyed the demon girl? If so, I'd be beyond amazing. Or it'd be beyond amazing. When I opened my eyes, the one standing there was Nanami, rather than the demon girl. She was looking at me tad derisively. All the strength went out of me at once. I flopped right down where I had been standing. She was the worst little sister ever. It's in horribly poor taste to enjoy freaking out your brother. Who the hell does she think she was? This was why the third dimension would never hold a candle to the second. Worried? She'd been worrying about me? Like I'd be fooled by such an obvious lie. I left my phone behind at my base. It wasn't like anyone would call me while I was walking around, so no point in holding on to it.
そもそもその剣何なの？もしかして買ってきたの？
Nanami gazed curiously at the sword.
あ、わかった。アニメのおもちゃかなんかでしょ？ほんと、お兄ってオタクさんだね。しかもこのおもちゃ、ちっとも似合ってないよ。さっきだってへっぴり腰で構えちゃってて思い出したら笑えてきた。
Ignoring Nanami, I undid the lock on the container house's door and began to go in.
ちょっと無視すんな。
帰る。
If she'd come to check on my survival, she didn't have anything left to do here. She was constantly making fun of me, and every time she came here, all she did was complain. But if it bothered her that much, she didn't have to come in the first place. It was a hassle for me as well.
あのね、わざわざ様子見に来てあげてんだから、もっとありがたがってよ。せっかくお土産まで持ってきたのに。
Nanami spoke sulkingly, pouting.
お土産？
そう、お母さんが持ってけって。ほら。
Nanami handed me clementines. There were about 10 of them, held in red netting. I had mixed feelings about this. I'd eat clementines if they were there in front of me, but they weren't my favorite food or whatever.
というわけで、ナナもちょっと約束したいから一緒に食べてあげる。
帰れ。
もう、妹がお土産持ってきて、しかも一緒に食べてあげるって言ってるんだよ。もっと喜びなよ。
What precisely about eating clementines with Nanami was supposed to make me rejoice? Anyway, it was obvious that she'd simply wanted to eat clementines from the start, because she'd been a glutton since we were little. She used to eat up my share too. Who knew how many fights we'd started that way? Paying no attention to the fact that I didn't want her there, Nanami went on into my base. There was nothing to be done for it, so I followed after her.
お茶ある？あったかいのがいいな。
As if I would. Basically, I don't drink anything besides Coke. Nanami sat down on the sofa and immediately pulled out a clementine. Sighing, I leaned the D sword up against my computer desk. I didn't need the bangle in my pocket, so I lobbed it.
あれ？それ何？
Quickly spotting the bangle I tossed away at the floor, Nanami picked it up.
へえ、かわいいバングルじゃん。これも買ってきたの？お兄にしてはいいセンス。
Cute, she says? What about it? No matter how I looked at it, it was a piece of kitsch one could buy for the likes of 500 yen. Nanami was the one with bad taste. Disregarding her, I took one of the clementines and went to sit in front of my PC.
ねえねえ、なんでこれ捨てちゃうの？
だっていらないし。
じゃあさ、これナナにちょうだい。
はあ？
いいじゃん、どうせ捨てるならさ。たまにはお兄ちゃんらしく妹にプレゼントの一つでもしてよ。
You call it a present, but it's an unneeded item that you started coveting all on your own.
勝手に持ってけば。
本当？やったー。
What an uncontrollable girl. Gotten the go-ahead from me, she'd put the bangle around her wrist right away. She was a pretty cheap sister to get delighted over such a cheap item.
お兄どう？似合う？
全然。
おっそ？お兄のバーカ。
I was supposed to have given her a present, wasn't I? So what's with this treatment? Little sisters weren't supposed to call their brothers stupid. What kind of education have you been receiving, huh? Go play 100 eroge. She was grinning perkily. I was getting really pissed off here.
気に入っちゃったからもう返さないもんね。っていうか、お兄からプレゼントもらうなんて初めてのような気がする。しょうがないから大事にしてあげるよ。
Like I care. No one asked you to treasure it. I hadn't gotten it for Nanami's sake to begin with.
もう用は済んだんだから帰れ。僕は暇じゃないんだ。邪魔するな。
Okay, I'm gonna go and actually end this episode here. So, as I said, I'm ending the episode here. So, as always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe, share, and I will see you guys next time. But until then, goodbye and farewell. And I also want to let you know that Roommates will be finishing up next week. And once that is over, this series is going to be uploaded on a weekly basis on Wednesdays, like it currently is. But rather than being every other week, it's going to end up being every week, starting with essentially the next episode. But as I said, that's going to be it for this episode. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'll see you guys next time. But until then, goodbye and farewell.